The film begins at the Soan Research Institute, where specialists infuse a young fellow with a drug and perform routine tests on him. Somewhere else, Carl Anderson looks through a series of documents on his computer and prepares a report. Suddenly, a drone appears outside his window and drops an explosive, killing him in the blast. The following day, Chief An of the Korean Intelligence Agency finds out about the death of Carl Anderson from Americans. Immediately, he gets in touch with Dr. Shin Hak-shun and discusses the matter. They conclude that the young boy they were performing tests on should be moved to a more secure area because of the possibility of another assault. Meanwhile, Min Ki-hun, an ex-intelligence agent, visits a doctor to take medication for his headache. The doctor reprimands him for appearing without informing. However, Ki-hun tells him that he's been very stressed and he has not been able to rest for the last 2 days due to his migraine. After picking up a few medications, he leaves. Further, he drives to a beach where he takes those medications for his headache, and he begins to feel euphoric. His vehicle quickly sinks into the water, and he ends up in the middle of the sea drowning. Later in the evening, Ki-hun awakens back in the vehicle when a specialist knocks on his window. He starts the vehicle to escape, however, another specialist asks him to stop, or he would be shot. The men take Ki-hun to An, who tell him that the organization needs him for a very significant project. Ki-hun reminds him that he can't do his job, as he's no longer with the organization. Therefore, An tries to persuade him by saying he needs someone he can trust. Ki-hun gets convinced and asks him about the job and role, but An does not reveal much, saying it's a very confidential project. The following day, Ki-hun visits Shin, who takes him on a visit to their testing facility and informs him that they have increased their security level because it was attacked recently. Afterward, he introduces him to Dr. Lim Seon, who briefs Ki-hun about the project. Lim reveals that they have effectively cloned a human with hereditarily modified stem cells, and his speed is almost double of any normal human being. Soon they reveal the clone on the screen. He's sitting under a fake climate near an ocean. Shin tells Ki-hun that the clone can be viewed as another species, since he has extraordinary qualities not present in normal human beings. Further, he discloses that the clone is named Sobak, after a worker who was asked to look for a solution to eternity around 2,500 years ago by a ruler named Qin. Shin mentions that Sobak's bone marrow produces proteins that can fix any infection and makes him immortal. Ki-hun refuses to believe all this, leading Shin to request Sobak to exhibit his power, which is a symptom of cloning. Sobak supernaturally controls the stones which start to fly around him. Ki-hun thinks he's daydreaming and starts imagining things that are not happening. When he awakens, Shin tells him that his seizure happened because of an intracranial tumor, commonly known as a brain tumor. He states that he could live for a year at most. Afterward, he says that Sobak's brain marrow could help him with his illness. Later, he meets An in a restaurant, where he tells him that the groups liable for killing Anderson are afraid of the discovery and see Sobak as a strong weapon. Thus, they need to move him to a secret bunker, where trials will be conducted. It is also revealed to him that Shin has picked Ki-hun for the job, since he is not a security threat. Ki-hun agrees to accompany Sobak to a mystery shelter in the hope of getting his tumor fixed. The next day, the specialist injects Sobak with an inhibitor to restrain his cell division before they leave the facility. Lim tells Ki-hun that Sobak requires an inhibitor every 24 hours, as he's not a normal human being and he could die if his cell division loops get out of control. Eventually, they leave the facility in a truck, accompanied by 2 vans. On the way, Ki-hun acquaints himself with Sobak and tells him that they'll hang out a lot. Unexpectedly, the truck dials back as an ambulance cruises by them. The driver informs Ki-hun that they're taking a diversion since there's a mishap up ahead. In the meantime, An contacts the escort van and asks them to surrender Sobak and Ki-hun to the Americans when they show up to their destination. Before the specialist can cut the call, men inside the ambulance open the entryway and start firing at the escort van. The truck loses its balance and ends up on the opposite roadside. A shootout ensues between the specialist and the agents. Most of the specialists die in the shootout, and Ki-hun is left with Sobak in the truck. Ki-hun manages to kill a shooter moving toward the vehicle, but he passes out when one of them throws a canister of debilitating gas into the truck. Ki-hun regains consciousness after some time and finds himself tied up in the same truck. Immediately, an American agent enters the truck and attempts to inject Sobak with an inhibitor. However, he stops him with his supernatural abilities. Ki-hun also gets released and kills him. Suspecting a mishap, other agents move toward the truck, but before they can do anything, he starts the truck and escapes by breaking through the wall. During a stop, Ki-hun contacts An to tell him about where they are. An gives Ki-hun the area of the closest protected house. After the call, Ki-hun finds out that the truck is stalled and tells Sobak that they'll need to walk. Sobak confronts him and asks why he's protecting him in this manner. He confesses that his life depends on it. On the way, Sobak becomes curious about the shops in the city, so he requests Ki-hun to allow him to see around. Ki-hun refuses. However, Sobak vanishes from his sight after he gets a minor headache. Subsequently, Ki-hun finds him seeing eels inside a shop. Ki-hun assumes that Sobak looks weird, so he buys him new clothes and shoes. After arriving at a safe house, Ki-hun takes out weapons from a safe and starts waiting for reinforcements. When Sobak feels hungry, Ki-hun gives him a bowl of ramen. Sobak loves the ramen and ends up having 3 additional bowls, and he reveals that he's eaten ramen for the first time in his life. He was previously only fed special supplements at the lab. Ki-hun asks him about his daily life at the lab, and he says he just eats and gets tested all the time, and he also mentions that he keeps thinking about his fate. After some time, 2 specialists show up, but they point their guns at Sobok and tell Ki-hun that they've been ordered to kill him. Ki-hun takes a stand and remains between them to safeguard Sobok. The specialist warns him to step back, but he refuses. Therefore, they start firing, but Sobok uses his telekinetic powers to deviate the bullets. A fight ensues between one of the specialists and Ki-hun, and he manages to kill him. On the other hand, Sobok delivers a shockwave that takes the other one out. An calls the specialist to check whether they have finished the work, but Ki-hun answers and requests clarification. An commands him to kill Sobok, claiming it's for the country's benefit. However, Ki-hun determines that it's only for his benefit. Further, Ki-hun contacts Shin, who asks him to return Sobok to the lab, since they can no longer return to the organization. Ki-hun breaks the tracker on the vehicle to drive it to the lab. However, Sobok refuses to go with him since he wants to go to Oslin. Ki-hun hesitantly consents to drive him there, since he cannot convince him to return to the lab. During the drive, Ki-hun advises him to be infused with an inhibitor, but he doesn't appear to be concerned. Sobok asks Ki-hun for the reason he didn't move when the specialist shot at him at the house. Ki-hun replies that he too would die if Sobok was dead. Suddenly, Sobok vomits blood. However, the clone claims that he's fine. In the meantime, Soan director Kim Shan-woo contacts An to ask him for what valid reason he's attempting to kill Sobok. An bluffs obviously from the get-go. However, he admits that the Americans told him because they're afraid that the world would become temperamental when people don't die. An American authority cautioned that eternity would prompt constant conditions due to unsatisfied longings. Kim Walker threatens him that they would kill everybody associated with the analysis if An couldn't give up the clone, and An could likewise be remembered for their rundown of the targets. Shan-woo cautions him that the Americans can't be relied upon, and they need the clone for themselves. Shan-woo promises never to give up Sobok, so An advises him that he's weak, since he's conflicted with the public authority. Meanwhile, Ki-hun stops at the corner store to fill up the tank. He leaves Sobok in the car and calls Shin to tell him that Sobok spewed blood. Shin warns that Sobok's cerebrum waves will become unsound because he's been off the inhibitor for 2 days. In the meantime, Sobok comes out of the car and enters a general store where he starts gazing at 2 girls eating their feast. In no time, their male friends appear and bully Sobok. One of them snatches his shoulder, so Sobok hits him against the rack, while the other one hits him on the top of his head. Sobok uses his powers to force him. As Ki-hun reaches the car, he's concerned and starts searching for Sobok outside. He hears a strong sound that breaks the store's windows. Out and about, Ki-hun scolds Sobok for causing a disturbance and almost killing a boy. He thinks of leaving Sobok. However, Sobok apologizes. They stop at another location near the seaside, where Ki-hun accidentally reveals that he's returning Sobok to the lab. He tells him he needs to take him back for his injections. However, Sobok contends that he's just worried about him since he can save his life. Further, Sobok expresses his doubt that he deserves saving, and Ki-hun admits that he doesn't have the right to live, but believes that it's up to him to try his best to survive. Then abruptly, Ki-hun drops to the ground and collapses because of an extraordinary cerebral pain. While trusting that Ki-hun will awake, Sobok sits by the shore and thinks back to the moment he asked Lim what it was like to be dead. Lim, who he considered his mom, explained that it's like falling into the rest of eternity. When Lim was attempting to take care of Sobok with supplements, on one occasion he became angry and slapped her hand away. Lim encouraged him to eat to keep himself healthy. However, Sobok reasoned that she just believed he should be fit, so she could keep running her analysis. When Sobok said that Lim had just made him because Ki-hun, she blew up and slapped him. Soon, Ki-hun awakens and sees Sobok sitting by the shore. He inquires as to whether he had slept, but Sobok replies he doesn't rest since he doesn't know how. Further, Sobok asks Ki-hun what it's like to die. Thus, Ki-hun emphasizes that it feels horrible, so it makes sense that he's befuddled because he doesn't know if he should continue living or if he should die. He repents for living his life like a coward. Ki-hun begins to tell his story to Sobok. When Ki-hun was working for his organization, his partner Hun-soo requested that they serve as an informant, informing the public about the debasement of their access to positions. However, Ki-hun had already put a drug in her drink, making her unconscious. Suddenly, An reached there with his men and pushed Hun-soo's vehicle to the water while she was still inside the car. Sobok attempts to comfort Ki-hun as he sobs for Hun-soo. Further, he uses his power to make a mound of small stones laying around. After a while, Sobok asks him to take him to the Lim-hun church in Oslin. As soon as they get to the church, Sobok heads directly to the sepulchre. He opens the box of a kid named Ki-yon and tells Ki-hun that the kid is the reason he was made. His mother got sad when her husband and the kid died in an accident. His mother created him. Sobok asks Ki-hun for what reason individuals fear death, since it's just like sleeping. Ki-hun says that the individual don't hesitate to rest, since they know they'll wake up the next day. Sobok tells him that death panics him, but at the same time he's anxious about living for eternity. He begins sobbing since he doesn't have any idea of how to deal with his fears. After leaving the congregation, Sobok requests Ki-hun to return him to the lab, since he has no other place to go. He also says that he'll save Ki-hun's life, since he was brought into the world for that reason. Suddenly, Sobok begins vomiting blood again. The police immediately notice the car and pursue it when Ki-hun disregards the traffic signals. On notices them through CCTV and asks his men to get them. After barely escaping the police, Ki-hun arrive at the port where So-eun's boat is stationed, and he finds that On's men also followed them there. In the end, he has to stop the vehicle after the spikes penetrate the tires. As soon as On's men are about to shoot them, a drone flies toward them and detonates. Soon, Sobok and Ki-hun are taken to the lab. On contacts Shan-woo to warn him that they must choose an option to send off an attack. Shan-woo remains rebellious because he has employed hired soldiers to protect the lab. On concludes that Shan-woo paid soldiers to kill Anderson, when the executive found out that Anderson had been keeping an eye on So-eun. When On shows up with his army at the port, Shan-woo takes steps to release a video of Sobok to the press. He explains to On that he's not trying to save mankind, but rather believes that the powers should decide who lives and who dies. Soon, Ki-hun awakens and finds that the specialists are now beginning the process to remove liquid from Sobok's bone marrow. Shin informs him that they will take 40 milliliters from him every day until they gather a full 1 liter. Ki-hun is displeased that Sobok would go through it for a month, but Shin realizes that they plan to do it to him forever. Ki-hun says that it's horrible. However, Shin contends that Sobok isn't human. Ki-hun still asks Shin to stop the extraction, but Shin asserts that nobody can stop it. He asks about Lim. Shin shows him her body and discovers that the gatekeeper shot her when she attempted to kill Shan-woo. Angry, Shin runs toward the gatekeeper and attempts to shoot Shan-woo, but he misses. The gatekeepers begin beating him. However, Shan-woo advises them to stop since he's the test subject. Meanwhile, Sobok awakens and sees Lim's body and laments. Shin attempts to inject him with the inhibitor, but Sobok stops him and repeatedly hammers his body to the floor. The gatekeepers begin shooting at Sobok as he walks toward him, but none of the bullets could touch him. Sobok then smashes a steel stage and throws it against the army. Further, he shatters Shan-woo in his wheelchair in his anger. Sobok releases an explosion of energy that takes out Ki-hun and the guards accompanying him. Due to the boat's unexpected opening, the specialized squad starts to fire. When Sobok tears an opening in the wall of the ship and walks toward them, they start shooting at him. However, none of their shots hit him. As soon as he hits On and the specialist squad with a shockwave, Sobok suddenly drops to his knees and starts puking blood. On the other hand, Ki-hun awakens. He gets into an armored-covered van and attempts to drive out of the ship, but it's held down by the chains. Meanwhile, On starts firing at Sobok with mounted firearms. Even though he takes no wounds, Sobok is thumped back by the power of the weapon. Soon, the chains on the reinforced van break, and Ki-hun rams the vehicle against On's APV and drives towards Sobok to help him. Ki-hun gets hit with a sharp object when On shoots the armed van repeatedly. Ki-hun advises Sobok to run, but he reminds him that he has no place to go. Then Sobok moves toward the army and uses his ability to shoot an opening into the ground underneath. Raw petroleum steams out of the broken pipes as On's men try to escape the opening. As Sobok attempts to light it with the burning van, Ki-hun stops him, but Sobok pushes him away. Ki-hun implies that Sobok realized what might happen when he returned, so he asked him why he chose to return. Sobok says that he needed to be significant to somebody. He says that this is not going to end until he is dead. He requests Ki-hun to shoot him. Ki-hun does not want to, but he eventually gets a weapon and shoots Sobok after the clone explains that he can never take off from death. Ki-hun stoops before Sobok and sobs as the clone falls into everlasting rest. At some point, Ki-hun walks to the ocean side, where Sobok organized the stones by the shore. He gets a stone and puts it on top of the heap before leaving, marking the end of the movie. If you enjoyed that recap, I got a good feeling that you'll like this one too. Click on the video on your screen for more.